Welcome everybody to the launch of A Window for a Home Without Walls. My name is Isha Dandavate and I'm a senior UX researcher at Google. I'm also Uday's daughter. Today we have some truly amazing, inspiring and accomplished people here to speak about the ideals and the values that are at the heart of this book. I am not one of those people, but I'm here as an MC, and I'd like to kick off by sharing my insider perspective of the journey that has brought us here today. Despite my obvious biases being Uday's daughter, I think I can objectively say that it is incredible how quickly this book came together. Uday began working on it with Mookesh at the end of April, and the book was finalized and ready for sale by June 1st. That's just about 5 weeks. And so those of you who know Uday probably aren't surprised by this. I certainly am not. When my father gets an idea in his mind, no matter what time of day it is, no matter where in the world he is, his momentum is unstoppable. His energy and his enthusiasm and his support crew who worked nights and weekends for the past 5 weeks have brought us here today. Uday's wisdom flowed from him into the poems that fill this book. He challenges us to live purposefully, to put down our egos and embrace curiosity and optimism, to hold compassion and gratitude for our fellow humans and our planet. I am incredibly proud and I'm honored to kick off this event. So with that, let me review with you all what we have planned for the next hour. So this event will have 3 parts. First, to kick off the launch, we have 2 eminent thought leaders and activists who are recognized worldwide for their contribution to the field of sustainable development. They will present their perspectives on the relevance of this book to current contexts and future imperatives. Then we will hear from the co-creators of the book, Uday and Mookesh, and they will engage in a conversation with 2 other people in the field of education. And finally, we will bring in the voices and perspectives of the audience in the 3rd section. Now, usually at book launches, there's a symbolic unwrapping of the book. Ba, are you ready?
No.
Congratulations, Uday bhai. Thakurji tamne sukhi rakhe.
Wonderful. So I'm very honored to introduce Mr. Ashoke Chatterjee. Mr. Chatterjee became the executive director of the National Institute of Design in 1975, which is the same year that Uday joined as a student. He has served on many developmental institutions in India and around the world in sectors of drinking water, sanitation, disability, livelihoods, and education. He was the honorary president of the Crafts Council of India for over 20 years. He is the author of Rising and Dances in Golden Halls. The titles of his presentation will be Alternate Futures, A Challenge of Choices, and he will talk about design as poetry of caring. Mr. Chatterjee, are you there? The stage is all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you and congratulations, Uday.
Thank you.
And also to Mookesh for the amount of love and care that has gone into this book. Windows for a House Without Walls comes to us at a time when all humanity seems walled in by fear of a microscopic virus, as well as by fear of each other, and by anger and by frustration. But it's not really new. About a century ago, in another book of poems, Rabindranath Tagore observed how much time we spend in building walls that go up into the sky day by day, enclosing our names within a dungeon, and losing sight of our true being. Uday's collection is a journey towards that true being, reminding us of the need for windows that can let in the compassion, the wisdom, and the empathy we all seem to need today to survive the uncertainties of this time. Isolation and distancing is what we are pressured to do on the one hand, and yet on the other hand is the urgency now more than ever of Gandhiji's advice to open our windows to the winds of the world. Perhaps only then can we conquer fear, sustain hope, and find strength in chaos. The three capacities, the three qualities urged by Uday's parents, to whom this collection is dedicated. That a designer should turn to poetry should be no surprise to anyone, certainly not to me, and certainly not to a designer whose alma mater was inspired by a statement written out as blank verse, dedicated to the lota as a symbol for a profession that was brought to India as an expression, and I quote, of service, dignity, and love. There's a lot of love in this book as well. But those words of Charles and Ray Eames saw love as an ability to see the world through other people's eyes, which is the capacity and the quality that enables a designer to be of real service to others and to restore dignity to their lives. Dignity that is such a huge issue today as we look at what this pandemic has done to Indian society and to other societies around the world. And as we listen to the struggle in the US and other places for the rights of those who have been deprived of their dignity for so many centuries. Uday will remember the stirring words of Ravi Mathai at the first NID convocation in 1979. And I quote his words, "You designers are the link between the substantial shapes and forms of the output of science and technology and the poetry of human sensitivity and need," unquote. The poet's task, as Uday reminds us on these pages, is to challenge what Uday has described as, and I quote, "the violence against nature and humanity, and to resurrect the God inside us." 1,000 years ago, that too was what another designer felt at another time of struggle, at another time of protest and of demands for reform. That designer and a poet was a weaver, and his name was Devara Dasimaiya. And this is what he had to say in one of his greatest Kannada poems, translated by the late A.K. Ramanujan. And I quote, "Whatever it was that made the earth the base, the world its life, the wind its pillar, arranged the lotus and the moon, and covered it all with folds of sky, itself inside. To that mystery, indifferent to difference, to it I pray, O Ramanatha." That mystery, indifferent to difference, is with us on these pages. So thank you, Uday. You have my good wishes and many of my memories. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Next, we have Medha Patkar, or she is called Medha Tai. Medha Tai is a social activist working on crucial political and economic issues to empower tribals, Dalits, farmers, laborers, and women facing injustice in India. She is an alumna of TISS, a premier institute of social science research in India. She was the founding member of the National Alliance of People's Movements. And on a more personal note, Medha Tai and Uday's parents were contemporaries and leaders in the Indian freedom struggle. She continues to embody the ideas of humanitarianism and sustainable living. Medha Tai will talk about her vision for a humanitarian and sustainable future.
Thanks a lot, Isha, and hearty congratulations to Uday Bhai for coming in or coming out at the right point of time for not just we, the Indian activists, but all across the world. It is certainly a time when, as respected Ashoke ji said it, when we are said to be locked down. Although I'm not locked down, I've just come from the place which was the constituency, electoral constituency of Uday Bhai's father, the Konkan area, part of the Western Ghats. And what a devastation we have witnessed over the last few days due to the cyclone that it faced. But we are amidst cyclone and cyclone and cyclone of different kinds. And it's coming not just from the nature, but the power holders and the power mongers as well. Amidst this, when, as Uday Bhai has rightly said, the optimism that his father has imbibed and inculcated in him is what is reflected in this poetry. A designer, can he or she be a poet? Yes, of course, because the search and research, which is a part of the designing, are the parameters of human life and nature as well. So linking the human life with nature, which goes beyond the very formal ecological analysis and presentation, is something that comes through this poetry. And this is a must because all that is happening around us when we are a part of the environs cannot be just discussed and debated either on the channels or in Copenhagen or Paris in the climate change summits and conferences. And hence, to open up when they are wanting to lock us down and put a mask on our mouths and raise our voices is what is expected by anyone who is optimist of changing the present situation. Sustainability, which is a part of a flowing river or a standing mountain range, that is something that is a must for our lives to survive, not just for the nature to survive. And that is what is the message that is given. He says, I long to be a river. And why? Because that window to a home that is without walls is something that gives a framework of values. And those are the humanitarian values which he is talking about. And today, that is what is lacking. If we are natural, we are to be humanitarian because they both go together. And hence, when he describes a rock that is firm and just to be, we too have to just to be, but we also have to be active. We have to act as a flowing river towards sustainability. And for that, what he expresses about the nature, the nature's wisdom and the nature's bounty is something that needs to be inculcated within every human being. So linking the nature with human being will link the human being with human being as well. These two types of relationships are to be binding all of us. And that what is happening around is exactly the opposite. Right up to mob lynching, when there is real social distancing, not just the physical distancing with the COVID-19 that is imposed upon us, but the social distancing, which is really brought in by a design. They are the power designers, and that needs to be also fought against as we, the activists, see it. But Udayji is giving a very, very broad vision and a message. That is a message of Gandhi. That is a message of Baba Sahib as well. And that is a message of Marx, who stood with the proletariat. And it was Udayji's father who brought these three ideologies of three ideologues together in his great book contributing to all of us, our vision. So it is the designer and a poet with an inner passion and an outer, that is broader vision, that is in Uday Bhai, and that is brought up during the lockdown period. We know, friends, that the climate change is resulting in an absolute injustice. So the non-sustainability of nature and the natural resource matrix is because is to be taken care of and addressed and also fought against, as we say it, although that is not the message of Uday Bhai's poetry. He looks at everything with love. He looks at even the destroyers or the destructive mechanisms as something which is no doubt a deviance, but he has a hope to bring it back to the right path. And that also really matters to all of us. When we are in struggles, we know that reconstruction, revival, rejuvenation, regeneration are also the goals that we have to pursue. And that is something that we get from this book. He is really critical about everything that goes with violence. And hence the message of non-violence is also very, very clear. It is violence against nature and violence against human being. Both he criticizes with a very, very poetic way. He says nature gives us a reason to pursue a shared ground. And if the human beings do not realize this, they will not be humane to either nature or to living beings at large. Hence the poem, which is bringing out a sublime message, is something that giving us a great hope. I think although we are activists and we are strugglers, we also are for reconstruction. And it is not just the construction through some kind of industry or a corporate mechanism or a technology of the modern times. It is reconstructing the relationships, as I said. So when he says that we have to live with different perspectives, it is the message of diversity. It is a message of tolerance that is lacking everywhere. When he says that we are only a microorganism in the abundance of the vast universe, it is something that really helps us to shed our ego and also to be one with the other living beings. That also is very, very important today, because it is the power, it is the money power, it is the corporate power, it is the political power, and it is also this power of so-called transparent knowledge that is taking over our own conscience. But Udayji reminds us that we have a conscience in our heart. So we have to have a home without walls which will accommodate everyone. But that also cannot be without a framework of vision. And that vision will always be of human rights and human values, of sustainability, but also of equitability and justice. If we don't bring all this together, which his poetry brings in, we will lose everything. Not just humanity and nature, but we will lose life itself. I think that's why we really have a heartfelt welcome to the poems and the book that is already released, and also to the great poet who is the designer of the future and for the future. I think the activists also will learn a lot and try and be introvert, which I think you have already been, not just during the lockdown, but also when it opens up, we will open up our vistas to the vast nature and the grand humanity both. Thank you, Uday Bhai. These are the words I could extemporaneously think of after having seen the devastation on one hand and having worked throughout for last 3 months with the migrant workers who are said to be informal, but who are deliberately peripheralized and marginalized. And India and the whole world must have watched them becoming not just informal or unorganized, but becoming the citizens who are the real producers and who are real creators, but they have no space, no dignity, as Ashoke said, and no justice in this economy of the world and also of India. So the message that you are giving to a corporate CEO is also very, very, very important. That leave behind your money and market and your corporatization, which is attacking the land, water, forest, minerals, aquatic wealth, everything that all of us live with. Not just those who work with those resources and earn their income or their livelihoods, but all of us who survive with food and water and the medicines, everything comes from there. And those are the resources which cannot be commodified, which cannot be corporatized, which cannot be just part of the market give and take. We have to live with those resources and value those as a part of our life. I think this is the message you are giving. When the economy may go through recession period, but then if it revives, it may go back to not just zero, but the higher and higher GDPs, and those aspirations which you are targeting will really destroy much that needs to be saved. So I think you have given umpteen number of messages to this. Haji Ali looking at the moon in your childhood to being a part of the riverine ecosystem. Thank you very much. With the folded hands, I say Zindabad also.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Medha, for your wonderful interpretations of the poetry, for the powerful imperatives that you shared with us of overcoming social distance, speaking for human rights, dignity, and values. That was amazing, and we are blessed to have you here with us today. Thank you, and we shall move on to the next bard. Thank you so much. So now, Prasad Boradkar will moderate a conversation with Uday and Mookesh, co-creators of this book. Prasad is an author of multiple books on design, Professor Emeritus in Design at Arizona State University, and he is a user research and sustainability lead at Google. Professor Mookesh Patel is an emeritus at Arizona State University and former dean at the Indian School of Design and Innovation in Mumbai. And also joining is Sunand Bhattacharya, a learning architect and the Associate Vice Provost for Design and Innovation Strategies at Boston College. He and Uday both graduated from NID and Ohio State and have been classmates, colleagues, and friends for the past 45 years. Uday, Mookesh, Prasad, and Sunand will discuss the poetics of human-centered design and the future of design education. The four of you now have the floor.
Thank you, Isha. Wonderful to be here. So good morning, good afternoon, and a very late good evening to all of our friends, family in India. First of all, I want to thank Uday for a couple of reasons. First, for inviting us all to participate in this wonderful book launch. And second, for publishing such a marvelous and meaningful collection of his musings, reflections, poems, etc. So thank you, Uday, and congratulations on what a fantastic thing you've done. I'm delighted to be joined by some of my dearest friends here today. Uday, of course, who I met first at Ohio State, where we were graduate students together. Mookesh Patel, who I've known for many years. Both of us were teaching at Arizona State University, and both of us are emeriti now. And Sunand Bhattacharya, who actually was one of my first bosses when I joined ITT Technical Institute in the US. So thank you, friends, for joining me in this discussion. So I'd like to mention a couple of things. First of all, I also want to say thank you to Ashokji and to Medha for these marvelous introductions to the book and for raising these important things that we should be thinking about today and into the future. So as I read Uday's book and Mookesh's book, I realized that, and I'm sure many of you did this as well, is that while Uday is speaking about his own reflections, his own musings, the moments in his life that have been really meaningful to him, what he is really doing is he's urging all of us, all his readers, to engage in similar journeys ourselves. And as I was reading this book, and I'm thinking about things that these words inspired and these images inspired in me, I was reminded of a wonderful essay that Roland Barthes wrote in 1967, a French literary critic. And the title of his essay was The Death of the Author, but what he actually was referring to was when a text is created, when an author produces a piece of text, the text goes out into the world, and the meanings, there are multiple meanings to this text, they all are eternally recreated by the readers themselves. So as each of you will read this book, you will create your own meanings, and that's exactly what Uday wants you to do. He wants you to take journeys yourselves. In fact, he talks about this idea that multiple perspectives, multiple beliefs, multiple goals, multiple pathways, multiple journeys. And he also says a well-designed journey is self-created. As I read this book, as I read the poems, and I soaked myself in the texts and the images from Mookesh and Uday, images of a feather floating by, images of a rock on which I might have stumbled, images of a leaf that flutters down from the sky onto the ground. These images, these words, these texts, they take me out of myself into the world as I engage in this world, but they also take me within, they take me inside. And I care for these things outside of me because they mean something deeply to me. And as I encounter these things outside in the world, they are encountering me as well. I care for them because they mean something to me. And so it is this notion of care that Uday talks about in his book. And it is this notion of care that binds us all together. And it is in such times of crises when it becomes so apparent, so real, and so stark that it is care that we need more than anything else in the world. We need to care for the other. And that other means not just other people. Of course, we need to care about other people, but everything else, all the animals on the planet, all the insects, all the birds, all the animate and what we call inanimate objects, all of these things, we should live a life of caring. Care for yourself and care for all that is outside of you. Uday talks about and teaches us this notion of design with and for care. And I use the word design very broadly. All of us are designers in some way, in some capacity in this world. And to design is to create something. And when you create something, ideas, words, objects, graphics, anything, could be anything at all. Create that. Relationships, create that with a sense of care. There are several students in the audience today. So to the students, as you embark on your own journeys of creation, of design with care. Think about care as you embark on your journeys. Think of care, and when you think of care, think of all the species on the planet. That's how you will create the sustainable future that Medha referred to. I think I've said a lot more than I intended to. I would like to now invite my friends and colleagues, Mookesh, Uday, as well as Sunand, who have always lived a life of care. They are designers, they're educators, and above all, they're amazing human beings. So if you don't mind, I would now like to invite Mookesh, who has co-created this book with Uday, to talk about what care means to him, how he poured care into this book, because it's very obvious as you pick up this book and look at it and read it, there's an enormous amount of care that has gone into its making, that care embodies in who Mookesh is. So Mookesh, would you mind saying a few words, please?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Congratulations, Uday. It's been a great, wonderful last couple of months to work with you and live your musings and reflections, which made me look at what I care for, as Prasad pointed out. Of course, everyone begins with our own families and ourselves to be loved and cared for. But I think it's so critical since our education at NID that, and of course, Mr. Chatterjee pointed out, and in fact, it was much more so during his directorship at NID that we all looked at another perspective of what design can do for people. That's when we realized that design is just not only for yourselves or others who have money to spend and be in a wonderful environment and use wonderful objects or spaces, but it is also the same care that we take for others who are less privileged, including animals, insects, environments, and so on and so forth. When I started working on Uday's book, in fact, when he sent me, it was a very interesting story, which I'm sure you read in the book, but to give a little glimpse of what, when he sent me the poems, I read it and I was completely lost in an environment that made me reflect myself, what I was doing and what I'm doing, what I care for. And I requested him if he could work together on this book together. And when we started looking for images, we must have looked at thousands of images. And to figure out the right image that would go with the right poem, to sort of emphasize my interpretations of his poems. So it was two voices working together and figuring out what is the right medium to show and actually make space for other readers who read it to create their own muses and create their own reflections. So that is what I did. And I'm sure you've seen that in your images, in the books that you have bought and the images that you've seen. What really inspires me today is, of course, Medha's and Mr. Chatterjee's and Prasad's whole impetus on care. Care is a wonderful short word, but it implies so much to what we have done in the past, to the present, and what we should be doing in the future. On those words, I would end my, thank you very much.
So, so Uday and I have known each other for 44 years, and we were pretty young when we joined NID. In fact, Mr. Chatterjee out there was one of the interviewers as we went through the entrance exam. And we've been through undergraduate, our first job, coming to America. In fact, he came to kind of drop me off also. It just so happened that he was making a trip to the US, our graduate school, and then our collaboration and partnership on many levels, and our families have been entwined in many, many ways. But the part that always stands out about Uday, however difficult a situation, Uday is an optimist. He always is able to bring out the positive aspects of difficult situations, and his generosity. His home, his parents' home, was a home actually without walls. I mean, any people were walking in and out at all times. Many of us have spent nights over there, and Uncle and Auntie probably didn't even know who we were. We had meals over there. We shared a lot of laughters and difficult times as well, but with a positive outlook. And as Isha pointed out, Uday is one person, when he puts his mind into something, he just charges, into it and makes it happen. From April to now, having a book release is almost impossible, something that people rarely can even comprehend. So about Uday, and I looked at the book more as reflections. So being in academia, being in both formal as well as informal learning and working with learners and learning myself, being able to break silos between disciplines is a very important thing. And it's about all of us working towards, whether it's racial justice, whether it's health, whether it's social justice, our connections. And in fact, Medhaji's background with the elephants kind of struck in terms of how metaphorically that is what we should all be working towards. And as I look at the book, whether it's humanitarian crisis or design is the scaffold that builds scaffold and imagination and imagining and experiencing. Those are the pieces, if we are able to successfully help our young next generation to kind of have that ability to build those scaffolds and to be able to appreciate the benefits of each other's disciplines, we would have done something meaningful. I'm in the midst of right now working on something that's called integrated science and society, how we bring the humanities and the social sciences into engineering and sciences. And this book actually can be one of the connecting tissues that people can appreciate from irrespective of what their disciplines are. So the care that's been taken into putting the book together, the care that is taken in terms of how we exercise our thoughts and processes and bring out the best in our learners is something that comes through with what Uday has kind of put together through these reflections. And I look at it as more as reflections that kind of lead us to discern. And there's another piece about Uday I just forgot to mention. He's always been interested in areas outside, beyond classical design. When I first met him, Uday was a mime artist. I don't know if many of you know. We all looked very different from what we were. And Uday, he wore the Marcel Marceau, black tights and the white striped t-shirt. Uday even traveled to France, if I'm not mistaken, to meet him. So miming was one of his areas. Street theater, he stood up for a cause, and many of my classmates at the time did street performances on bride burning in India, which was at its worst at the time. Dance art, working with Rohini. And his whole activity of co-creation, bringing disciplines together, is what he's all about. And now the reflections. So Uday, thank you for putting this whole thing together and exhibiting a pathway of care as well as humanitarian reminders and behaviors for us.
Thank you.
So Uday, we've been talking about you, we've been talking about your book. I see you sitting there and listening intently to all of us. All three of us, Mookesh, Sunand, myself, we'd like to hear from you for a bit as well. I'm sure the 153 people online right now would like to hear from you as well. So I invite Uday to say a few things now.
So one thing I want to say is that my purpose is not to say anything. The poems should speak not about what I want to say, but about what your inner voice says. The poems should have a dialogue with you because one of my teachers from NID brought out something amazing when I first showed him the poems. Mohan Bhandari, who was the co-creator of the foundation program at NID, he went to the whole book and he said, I'm remembering a poem that's written by Iqbal, the famous Urdu poet Iqbal. I'm going to first say it in Urdu and then I will translate it in English. It said, Hazaro saal Nargis apni benuri pe roti hai, badi mushkil se hota hai chaman mein didawar paida. In rough terms, what it means is for years, the bud languished in the darkness, unnoticed, unappreciated, until one day it bloomed into a flower, just when a maven was visiting the garden. My interpretation of that in the context of this book is, I created my own poetry. Like the daffodil, the poem may have lived inside me as a bud for decades, unnoticed, unappreciated, until the day it was ready to bloom and I was ready to appreciate it. I think the values that we were nurtured with by our parents, by our schooling, by our curiosity, by our observations, by our sensitivity, by our compassion, creates that bud in us. It keeps growing until the time it's ready to come out. I was never a poet, and I'm not going to embarrass Isha by narrating my first poem when she was 5 years old, but it was a disaster. And I realized that I was told I should never attempt to write a poem. And then, so I never wrote a poem, but what came out now by virtue of this 8-month-long a series of epiphanies that began with the poem an untucked feather, and then it didn't stop. Right in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock, I would get up, and the poem would push herself out of me. So therefore, I have nothing to say, but rather, as a design researcher, I have only questions. I don't have anything to tell you. I only have questions to ask you. And my question is, what does it feel like? Because my whole purpose is, in Mookesh's word, like his first reaction is, he said, I feel it, I want to interpret it, and I want to express it. My appeal to you is, feel it, interpret it, and express it. So that's about it.
That was marvelous. Thank you, Uday. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I'm sure the audience is delighted to hear from you as well. Well, I'm going to pass this back to Isha, a wonderful, caring MC, to take us through the next steps of the program. Thank you, Isha.
Thank you so much, Prasad, Mookesh, and Sunand. It was wonderful to hear from you, and of course, Uday. It was great to hear your perspective, Baba. So before we move on to the next section, Uday would actually like to say a few words of thanks to recognize all the people who have brought him here today. Baba?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I did not see these spurts of poetry turning it into a book. It was my wife, Rohini, who said, you've got to use this time to bring it all together, see what it means, and share it with the world. So I want to thank her for that, for even recognizing that something was going on with me. I want to thank Mookesh for that beautiful, almost like a tagline and a purpose he gave me is feel it, interpret it, and express it. And he has been a wonderful person to work with. I've known him for 45 years, just like Sunand, or actually 1 year more. But I really discovered him in this process of what an amazing interpreter of meaning he is. And he told me he teaches connection between haiku and design in school. I'm sure his students have had a great time doing that. So thank you, Mookesh. I do want to thank Isha and AJ, my daughter and son-in-law, for their constant feedback. One thing Isha does well, and now AJ is learning to do, is they are a good bullshit detector. So, and so they can tell me what not to do. A lot of things that you have not seen, are not seen today, are probably filtered out because they help me clean it up. Ash and Jeff in Sonic Rim, my colleagues at Sonic Rim, all throughout this process of me writing the poem and my blogs, Ash has been a wonderful cleanup person. Like, she really looked at the essence, she looked at the expression and cleaned it up for me. Jeff gave me feedback when I decided to start producing the book. So thank you to Jeff and Ash. Arvind was always a support. Thank you, Arvind. Another person that I must express thanks to is Molly Pierman. I met her when she was taking on a long 600-kilometer ride on a horse in Mongolia. And she was asking for support. And Sonic Rim sponsored a part of her venture by supporting her warm clothing. And also my friend Mahmood Khan offered to host her team for their first meal in Ulaanbaatar. She did amazing work as an editor of this book. She is a writer, she's an editor, and she's an adventurist, as you can see. But she really helped me be precise in my expression. And I would say it was just like Mookesh's and mine was a partnership. Molly's and mine was also a partnership. And at some point, Mookesh, Molly, and I were interacting and challenging each other on what conveys the essence best. So that was interesting, challenging, and very productive. So thank you, Molly. And I would definitely say if anybody ever wants to write another book, Molly is the right editor to go to. EJ, another person who has been helping me put the content together to put it out to the world. She just created the website. It's going to go through refinement. You should definitely go check it out. a window for a world, a window for a home without walls.com, and we started putting out reviews, writings, and so on over there. It would become a great learning resource online as we move forward. So all of you guys, thank you so much. You've been great support in this endeavor. If I've forgotten anybody else, I want to thank my mother-in-law. She's 88 years old, and she was very enthusiastic about opening this book and giving me her blessings. So I said she has to play a role. Was very excited all throughout, and her real message was, I hope after today you will take some rest. So I will try, but no guarantees. So thank you very much. Back to Isha.
Thanks so much, Uday. I will pass it off now to Ash Anderson, the lead anthropologist at Sonic Rim. She will moderate a conversation with 6 readers who we have brought in to have a dialogue about the book. Our 6 readers are Dr. James Fathers, who is the director of the School of Design at Syracuse University, Patty Sutherland, the cultural anthropologist who is based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Anoop Tawakle, who is CFO of a large global financial strategy network, who's dialing in from Gurugram, India, Isabel Martellani, who is a global cultural insights specialist with a specific expertise in luxury, beauty, and fashion, who's joining us from Geneva, Switzerland, Ashim Roy, Vice President of the New Trade Union Initiative, who is based in Ahmedabad but calling in today from DC, and Ian Kaneko, who is a student of music composition, who's joining us from Seattle, Washington. Ash, would you like to take it from here?
Sure. Thanks, Isha. And I do have a few questions I can ask, but I imagine that there are more interesting things than what I've thought to ask that might come out of you. So if any of you have something you would like to say, a reaction or a story you'd like to tell to start us off, I would love to hear it.
I'd like to say, sorry, this is James Fathers. I'd like to say that I've been looking for ways to ground myself in these historic and unprecedented times, and been looking to things like meditation. And these poems really, I found them so helpful to meditate on. The words provided comfort and clarity and wisdom and inspiration. I come from Celtic people in the UK, and we would call someone who does this a bard. So I think a bard of design is exactly what we need at the moment.
James, you said you might use this book to teach.
Absolutely.
Tell us how you might do that.
So I've already given it to, so we use poetry in our first year experience. And we already do that, and I've already been having conversations with my head of first year, who started that initiative independently, who really loves it and finds it fascinating that a designer would write these poems. And there's 2 or 3 we're already planning to use next semester. I found it fascinating. I spent a number of years in India, and as an American, he reads this and said, I don't understand how the words are put together. And he said, I said, well, okay, I get that. It must be because I understand. I think Uday's speaking Indian English, and I understand that. And I get the way the phrases go together. And I found them so inspirational. But I found it fascinating that the construction was different. But yeah, we've got a number of things we're going to use next semester, and we're very excited about it.
Great. Did anyone else have something that they wanted to say?
I'm speaking now as an anthropologist and an ethnographer, and I just wanted to call out, and it also would be very good for teaching, is the really wonderful poem about how to be a mindful ethnographer. I thought it was amazing that poem really brought to life the process of participant observation or of doing field work, and that there were so many wonderful, the juxtapositions, like look but don't search, and participate but don't get involved. It was just really wonderful for capturing the spirit of ethnography, of doing ethnography. So I wanted to call that out. And I also thought that another really wonderful thing that people often forget about in doing participant observation, you have a line about, you know, think about it, but don't connect the dots too soon. And I also thought that was very key advice. So there's a wonderful, wonderful poem for students. And just in addition to that, of calling out that one particular poem, I just think there's so many, as many people have said already today, there's so many gems of wisdom that are in this book and that sort of make you stop and think. And I have to say that one of the rock, which was brought up at the beginning a few times, about just to be, I thought it was very interesting about, you know, maybe the rock doesn't have a purpose beyond just being, but the way in which you brought to light the many purposes that people bring to the rock. So I thought that was very insightful, as well as that people remember our energy fields, and the wonderful poem about one more chance, where a friend, you ask, how are you doing? And at first it's like, oh, everything is fine in the lockdown. Well, no, it's not really. So I just thank you for these wonderful gems of insight, Uday.
Thank you, Patty.
Hi,
How
this
about,
is Anup here. If you don't mind, I can jump in now. I've known Uday for almost as old as Isha is there, because both our children, Isha and my elder daughter, they grew up together in India. So that's more than 30, 35 years. And I don't come from the design field, but I'm a chartered accountant. So I actually feel that, you know, when I read the book, I felt that, you know, I was with Uday every stage of the journey that he was writing that book, because I could relate to everything that he was saying. And the my favorite poem there really was the one that he spoke about, the experience at Haji Ali. And Haji Ali, for those who have been in Bombay, is an iconic landmark of Mumbai. And to be there and experience the sunset, and then to look up and then see the moon, is something that in India at least we do a lot. And that is really where the continuity of life. And for us, I think that's the most important thing. In today's world, with so much of anxiety, and nobody really knows where we are going, Uday's poems are actually bringing a lot of hope, a lot of curiosity, and the fact that life is going to continue. And that is something that I found was really very powerful, and I really loved it. So Uday, thanks a lot for getting these points across to us. And also a shout out to everybody at home, because, you know, when Uday gets to work, Rohini, everybody else, including Isha and AJ, will probably all be in the support structure. But I think they all, without their support, I don't think Uday can do what he does best. And thanks a lot, Uday, for that.
Ashim. So I was his roommate, and thanks Uday for really calling me for this book launch. It is really, I'm so lucky. I feel so lucky that I'm here, and I can see so many old friends and old faces here. So I was his roommate in design school, and when we shared our youthful desires and dreams, sometimes in fragments of unfinished and unread poems, I remember them so much. I remember the little poems he wrote on little papers. Now, as I read his poems, I really discover a poet in the designer. And that is, as everyone else has said, it's so interesting and so rare. But when I was reading his poems, I know as a designer, he factors the emotional relationship that enmesh the hard problems. And he has engaged with the creative process of changing both the product and the user. I know all about this reading his blogs. But if this has made him a good designer, it did not end with designing. And that's so interesting. This creativity has slipped into poems. The pages of the books of his poems, the first one, I hope, and I am really wishing for the second one, are more like diary of that impulse. So I really read his poem book as first the diary of that impulse. And as I read, I glimpse the hidden nest he is nurturing in his mind, where he keeps his collection of unstuck feathers, as he calls it, that he has been finding throughout his global journey of designing. And that's very fascinating. It is in this nest that he finds his clarity. This poet within the designer has made him a good listener. And I really kind of appreciate that part of his talking. Listening to nature, listening to many reasons and multiple perspectives, and beyond reason, though an atheist, to find God's voice in others. That's an amazing capacity to feel like. For him, writing poems has become a transcendental retreat. And now I can understand his source of humility. I want to thank Uday for showing that road. The title is well chosen. I found it very fascinating. It is evocative of his being, the journey of a river across all lands. But there is a lurking disquiet that the reader can read. At least I read it like that. Does the designer still has an unfinished window for an undecided home? Is there a desire for a frame that can capture the view of the rock that he talks so much, that has survived the mighty tides of history to give a stillness of purpose? I think so. And so when I read his poem to the CEOs, though perched at a high echelons, he invokes the possibility of the outrage of the people with his dear CEOs to bring out that distance of the expertise of the professionals from the truth in the wisdom of the people that Medha said so much, their people. In this horizon of his imagination, people always remained. And that is what I feel so great about Uday as a friend and a long person and a person whom we have shared so much in these long years. As if a hidden destiny to serve the people. That was the way of his parents. I met his mother for the first time in jail in emergency and without him. So I remember every part of that history. The window of his house will always look onto a pathway. Will he walk that path and bring the magic of imagination for an alternative world? He will have to design a doorway first. And I know the second book is coming because I'm looking for the doorway from Uday. Thanks, Uday, for calling me. And thanks, Isha, for making this all happen.
Hello, I will try to jump in just to say a few words. So I've been working with Uday for years. I mean, long time. I met him a long time ago. So we were doing research together. And what I really liked from this book that I really read in 2 hours. So it was like very quick and very, very dense. And the simplicity of the words. And the simplicity, though they were very meaningful. So this is what I like. The flow was just easy, and it was easy to read. But each word was really meaningful, and it was really talking to me. And I think those are words that are talking to all of us here. I think here are people from all over the world are listening to us, and those simple words in this current situation we are all living and sharing, those are very meaningful words. So this is what I wanted to say, and to say thank you for letting us think about who we are and where we are going and what we are doing for ourselves and our planet. So thank you, Uday.
And thank you, Isabel. And we have one more, Ian Kaneko. Nice to see you. And hi, Steve.
Hi. There.
So yeah, you had said you were thinking of creating some music from these poems. So can you tell us why and what is that about?
Yeah, so I've actually already started writing because at school next year there's going to be some restrictions due to social distancing, and that means that the choir can't meet as it normally does. So we're doing a project for an online choir where everyone can submit themselves singing, and then we'll join them all together in editing. It can be like a real concert just online. And so our choir director reached out to the composition students and asked if any of us wanted to write some music for it. And I volunteered for that. At the same time, around there, my dad showed me Uday's poems, and it all just kind of fit together. So I searched through them and found the ones that I felt would kind of lend their voice to music the best. And while searching through them, I found that the poems weren't like other poetry I've read or worked with, because for music, I've worked with things like Emily Dickinson or Robert Frost, Ezra Pound, like those kind of poets. And this poetry was very different to me. It wasn't so flowery or any of that. It was very direct and very humbling, I felt. Like while reading it, I felt small, but not in a negative way. I felt small just like in comparison to all the things in the world around us. And I've just from hearing what everyone else has been saying, that sounds kind of like what y'all have been saying too. And yeah, I'm trying to recreate that feeling as best I can through music, and hopefully I can get that performed in the fall. And I'm really excited to have the chance to do that. And I thank Uday for lending me his words to do that with.
That is really beautiful. Do any of the other of you six have any last remarks you'd like to add here?
This is Patty. I would just say what I see a lot in the chat of just thank you for such a wonderful and inspiring event. And, thank you for asking me to be part of it.
Thank you, Ash, and thank you to our readers and our speakers. Say thank you to Mr. Chatterjee, Medha, Prasad, Mookesh, Sunand, and our audience participants. Uday intended that today's event would be focused on the message of the book rather than on him. And through the support of all of you on the call today, I think we have accomplished that. Thank you for taking time to reflect on the values that this book aims to provoke: humanitarianism, environmentalism, creativity, and optimism for the future. And thank you, Uday, Baba. Thank you for finding optimism in the ongoing crises facing our world today. I hope that we are all inspired to take action and bring these values into our world. As a reminder, if you haven't already read the book, it's available on Amazon in both Kindle and paperback formats. Though due to COVID, the paperback version is not yet available in India. Thank you again, everyone, for being with us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
કોંગ્રેચ્યુલેશન ઉદયભાઈ, ઠાકોરજી તમને સુખી રાખે.